Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, we're going to be talking about the newest album from Logic called Young Sinatra 4. You know, it's hard for me to believe it was just 5 years ago when I was openly praising a Logic album. Hell, I think most of you probably remember that review of Under Pressure, his debut album in 2014 that built on some pretty solid mixtape momentum and had some real significant weight to match Logic's flows and contemporary but distinctive brand of boom bap. I stand by that album as being legitimately great, by the way, highlighting a rising talent who had great taste in production and a lot of ambition, and that translated into his follow-up the very next year, The Incredible True Story, which took his content into a space-themed concept album that couldn't quite stick the landing. It was good, but not great. And then he followed it 2 years later with Everybody, that went on an even more ambitious and polarizing topic about him being biracial in America that earned him even more backlash, most because the album was a total mess. And yet, it was that album that netted Logic his first massive smash hit. Complete with guest appearances from Khalid and Alessia Cara, he got a song with the title of The Suicide Hotline to break into the top 5 of the Billboard Hot 100. It hadn't been his first charting presence there. The posse cut from Suicide Squad's Sucker for Pain gave him that a year earlier, and it's important to note that his less conceptual, more mainstream mixtapes in the Bobby Tarantino mold, they had a tendency to do pretty well in the Hot 100, but the Suicide Hotline song, it set a narrative around Logic as an approachable, generally non-threatening rapper who could flow his ass off, but wound up speaking around platitudes that could feel misconceived or kinda shallow, which yes, was something that had leaked into his songwriting on those albums too, but I do remember when Logic had more to say and could stick the landing. He's got that potential, but the execution wasn't coming there. And I'll admit I had a bad feeling about this project in particular, coming hot on the heels of some particularly stupid comments how he makes music for his fans and not for hip-hop culture of which he's a part. A bit of a spicy statement, and I guarantee it wasn't made with Wu-Tang Clan in the room, even despite somehow getting a significant chunk of the members to contribute to a song on this album. If he had said that, he probably would have been seen by somebody. But you know what? Even calling the album Young Sinatra 4 was telling. An album follow-up to a series of his breakout mixtapes with 4 songs breaking the 6-minute mark and a lead-off single featuring Ryan Tedder of all people and his caterwauling on the hook. Suffice to say, I was not expecting this to be great or even all that good. Was I wrong? Well, it's honestly harder to evaluate this album than I was expecting, most because I actually liked it a little bit more than I expected. But that is the frustrating thing. Young Sinatra 4 has snippets of what I used to really like about Logic, but also highlights a rapper in transition, moving towards a sound and style that ultimately I think will distance me even further from him. And as such, it's hard not to feel like Young Sinatra 4 is a transitional album trying desperately to balance the logic of the past and the logic of the future, and winds up feeling just a little hollow and unsatisfying as a result. Even if I'd argue I would probably like this album more than Everybody from last year, it's at least a little bit easier to revisit. And let me stress one thing before we go on here. As an entertainer, as a rapper, I generally like Logic still a decent bit. When he gets in his looser, more natural lane, he's got an expressiveness and charisma to balance against his flows that can be really compelling. And yes, as always, while I can see the roots in his flow and sound from Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole, I do think on a technical level, a pure skill, Logic is still a pretty damn good rapper. And I certainly think he handles his spoken word digressions on this project a heck of a lot better than on Everybody. Hell, even though he's gone through the story time and time again on previous albums that he's telling on Last Call, it's well told enough to be something I can go back to even to this day, even despite being overlong. My larger project with Logic comes more in structure and artistic instincts, and then he doesn't seem to have the impulse control to pump the brakes on what could be some questionable ideas or follow through on the good ideas. And with the increased success and validation on his plate, neither of that seems to be coming anytime soon in order to fix these problems. A lot of critics have already ripped on Logic for opening up this album with Thank You, which features an extended set of samples of his fans praising him from all around the world, not just for the excess but also the placement to open up a record that can feel pretty overlong. But for me, the more exasperating impulse is once again trying to tie this album back to the arc of The Incredible True true story. Yes, you're tying up a plot thread saying this is going to be your last album when it's really the last album in the Young Sinatra series, but it's a reminder that said self-gratifying plot is still ongoing and hasn't been resolved. Now, we'll get more into conversations of structure in a bit, but it does bring to the forefront the big question of theme, and namely Logic trying to solidify his popular legacy, especially coming off his biggest hit, representative of a facet of Logic's content that's given more emphasis than it arguably should have. And in a weird way, you get the sense that Logic wants to tell other stories and venture into different territory beyond just the self-esteem anthem that got him his hit, which leads to some weird moments of tonal whiplash, where following after One Day with Ryan Tedder, which is even more of a plastic attempt to replicate the same sentiments, you get Wu-Tang Forever, which features every surviving member of the clan plus a few affiliates spitting an average to pretty solid verse. And while I enjoyed the novelty of it all, certainly better than the song that Drake titled in that lane from Nothing Was the Same, it has this weird feeling of Logic wish fulfillment that hits awkwardly against all the best rapper alive posturing that creeps into other songs even if he tries to subvert it. And even that feels kind of weird when he's asking for a Jay-Z verse on The Return, or returning Eminem's shout out back on Iconic. And that circles back to the question of what Logic's legacy really is, especially as he paints himself as a student of the game and wears his influences so starkly. So let's ask that question. What has he created that's unique beyond a few ideas that feel increasingly unrealized even as he continues to call back to them? He's got a big discography, but precious little that's all that special and distinctive. And this is going to sound a little strange, so bear with me. I think Logic is at his most compelling and interesting when he's not talking about his career or his place in hip-hop. He proved with Last Call that still talking about his come-up can still kind of win me over, but he's always been at his best as a storyteller or painting a distinctive picture, especially on the bloody track Street Dreams 2, which is intriguing as an extended metaphor around his relationship in life, and it is an album highlight for me, probably the best song here. But the problem is how so much of this album keeps slipping back to Logic's obsession with his own current story arc, and leads to some frustrating contradictions. Thank You opens up the album seemingly as a love letter to the fans, but on the Glorious 5, he shoves them and his family asking for help aside. He disparages superficial shit, but then will brag about the shoe deal he wants on the same song. You get aspirational self-esteem content with sadly not a lot in terms of distinctive wordplay, but then starts tacking on asterisks to that when we get songs like Legacy, where he speaks from the perspective of his family, including his now divorced wife, confronting him on his future deathbed, and they just wanted to spend more time with him. So you think he was going to say screw to the whole hip-hop legacy, but why then is he now highlighting all the hip-hop shoutouts and his success in that field? Or is all this just intended for the critics who call you out on all these inconsistencies? Or let me put it like this. For as much as Logic wants to frame the success of his work on his fans and on the larger world, on Iconic he sets it up so it literally says that everybody won because the album went to number one, but when it comes to the recipients of those success, he paints a very individualistic narrative to who gets the spoils of it. Which, you know what, I'm not against, but I'm calling out on some mixed messaging here, the sort of inconsistencies that kind of push me away from Logic as a whole. And here's the real frustrating thing. If you set aside the inconsistencies and how many of the punchlines and wordplay just feel kind of forgettable beyond the really fast flows, there's a part of me that still really digs a fair amount of this album, because I like Logic's flows, and the production from 6 is really flattering to Logic's style in general. I'll freely admit part of this is because Logic's embrace of old school New York boom bap on this project has always been the most naturally charming part of his persona in comparison with his utterly formulaic trap content, but I can't deny he picks some good production overall here. Now granted, the record doesn't exactly start strong. I'm not crazy about the blurry melodic tones and the samples that get increasingly blaring over Everyone Dies in The Return, which then come back on Legacy and less so on Iconic. And I've already talked about how the sterile piano hook from Ryan Tedder on One Day on Billboard Breakdown and how that song just does not work whatsoever. But by the time we actually get a solidly aggressive sample blend on Wu-Tang Forever, things start to pick up in the right direction. It's a good sound for him, even if the next song is a slice of sunny, bassy pop funk with Wale that's got a surprising amount of bounce and Logic flowing faster than ever. Even if the song is kind of lightweight, I still enjoy it. Shame the slapdash sequencing places the forgettable pop rap bounce of Ordinary Day right behind it for the Haley Steinfeld feature that adds very little. And then we get the title track that's intended as a tribute to Mac Miller that doesn't feature much beyond the same sort of braggadocious content that Logic usually delivers in the verses. Even if I do like the Nas sample, I can still tolerate the song. Hell, I even kind kind of dug the West Coast inspired groove that propelled the weed rap of The Adventures of Stony Bob. And with the rounded pianos coming off the sample on Last Call, the album does end well. It ends better than it starts. But here's the thing. I don't expect to hear more of this sound coming from Logic in the future, because he said this is his last Young Sinatra project. We'll likely get more of the Bobby Tarantino forgettable trap nonsense, because that's profitable in the mainstream right now, but the boom bap that he actually sounds good going over, it's going to be consigned to his history. And with that in mind, I'm not sure what's really about to pull me back to hear a Logic album, or even this album much in particular. Yeah, there are a few decent songs, but it reflects an artist who doesn't have the clarity or focus to take his work in a direction that either flatters him or requires that he present a complete thought just beyond looking at his navel. And that's disappointing, because again, I think Logic has talent and a lot of imagination to go in that direction if he actually commits to it. But that would probably be a risk and be a venture that would spook his label backing him, and as such we get a project that's trying to please way too many people and winds up feeling kind of underwhelming as a result. Not a complete misfire, mind you. There's enough decent cuts to push this up to an extremely light 6 out of 10, but if you're approaching a Logic project the same way I do, I think this is the right stop to get off the train, because I'm not sure anybody's gonna like where this is going from here. It's good, but I'm not expecting anything more from Logic. Sorry. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Logic fans, look guys, I wanted to love this, but it's not his best. Even if it's a return to sounds that I like, it still reflects a lot of elements going forward from Logic that I'm not sure I'm interested in or I want to hear from him. But if you want to buy or stream the record, links down there below, and the poll's there for y'all to tell me how wrong I am. Looking forward to it. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process or help support this channel, especially with all the records coming up in the next week, the link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. If you guys want to get a little bit more involved in my schedule, I've recently changed up some of the rules there, so please click and take a look. And if you want to see my schedule, it's on my Instagram, link down there below. But till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.